Are you talking shift? We are. It's time for the We're Talking Shift podcast. Now. Here to talk shift, Loree Bischoff. We're Talking Shift.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 69 of We're Talking Shift, the podcast where I talk a lot of shift because I believe that when we feel stuck, when it's time to level up, rise to a challenge, or make any kind of meaningful shift in our lives, that process must begin with a shift in our thinking. That is the antidote to feeling stuck. Today, I am super stoked to talk to y'all about my favorite beverage and one of the most consumed beverages on the planet, and that is coffee. You may not be aware that the latest research on coffee is revealing a host of fascinating info about that scrumptious smelling cup of deliciousness that has half the world consuming it daily, which brings us to today's guest, Jordan River. Now, Jordan is a professional podcast producer with over 5 shows in production in the field of health and wellness, personal development, and more. One of those podcasts is the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, which serves as one of the world's most cutting-edge resources when it comes to information on health and coffee. And let me tell you, I've listened to a few of them, and I have learned even so much more about coffee. It's really, really a fantastic podcast, so we'll be talking more about that later. But being the coffee lover and health freak that I am, I reached out to my fellow coffee lover and invited him to jump on over here to We're Talking Shift and share some of this cutting-edge research and all the good, bad, and the ugly stuff that he knows about coffee. So let's get to it. Jordan, welcome to We're Talking Shift.
Hey, thank you for that wonderful, comprehensive intro.
You're welcome. I am so grateful to have you here today. I know we're both obsessed with coffee, and I was thinking about this earlier, and really, I became obsessed with finding quality coffee, I should say, in like the mid to late 80s, somewhere around 1988-ish. That's when I first began really learning about holistic health and organic food. And so coffee was a really big focus for me because my thought was, if you're a coffee lover, you're pouring gallons of this stuff, through your body every week or close to it. And I know from listening to several of your podcasts and our earlier chat that, we have so much in common about holistic health and, when it comes to our beliefs in food as medicine and taking personal responsibility for your health, all that good stuff. So let's start there and how this became your passion and how this all ultimately connects with coffee.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I've been in the world of health and wellness for quite some time now, working in the personal development space, working with the personal development company Lifebook at Mind Valley. And, about 2 years ago, my trajectory completely changed and launched me into the world of coffee. Now, you were into coffee and health before it was cool. I wasn't even drinking coffee until I entered this world. So here's how it happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
I started working with a company called Purity Coffee. And
yes.
when I heard the idea of Purity Coffee, I realized that I had to involve myself with them. Basically, they were making the world's healthiest coffee. Their quest is to produce coffee with health in mind at every single step of the process. So when I heard about this, I was super fascinated. I'd heard a little bit about the statistics around coffee and health. And when I dug in, I was astounded at what I found. And, Loree, you touched on it right at the beginning of the show. Coffee is actually the second most consumed beverage on the planet behind water. It's also the second most traded commodity behind crude oil. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Wow.
And it is maybe the most misunderstood food product, which is strange because it's also the most heavily studied food product. So needless to say, someone who's as curious and inquisitive as me, when I breached this subject of coffee and health, my world was completely sent down this path. And I started drinking Purity coffee for the health benefits, fell in love, and now it is my go-to beverage. So that eventually led me to create the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast because Purity Coffee was looking to create the most comprehensive library on the studies surrounding coffee and health. And I said, well, nothing's better to convey information, as you know, Loree, in 2020 than a podcast. So we got started. I hooked up with Dr. Coffee. I hooked up with Dr. Sanjeev Chopra from Harvard Medical, and I've never looked back. It's been my life calling ever since.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of your episodes with each of those doctors, and I am just like, wow, there's so much more. I mean, I probably know a little bit more than the average person, but I had no idea. And it is so exciting because this is just another thing that a lot of people don't realize. Coffee can be good, it can be bad, it can be downright ugly, or it could absolutely be medicinal.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Yeah. So to understand some of these key components about the coffee that you're drinking, again, if you're somebody that doesn't drink coffee that much, or you have an occasional cup, it's probably not a big deal. But I think for those of us that we look forward to getting up every morning to our coffee, the smell of that, and maybe that afternoon cup. I mean, we just consume there's a love affair going on with it. And I don't drink coffee necessarily for the caffeine, although I do enjoy having that, in the morning, but I love the flavor of coffee. I just love the beverage. So I think when it's something that you are pouring through your system that consistently, it makes sense to be aware of the benefits or the dangers of the substance that you're putting through your body every day.
I want to touch on there. Yeah, there's so much that I want to touch on there. First of all, you're absolutely right. The thing about healthy coffee specifically is it's one of the easiest high leverage moves that you can make in your life for your health and fitness. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, getting someone who doesn't exercise to begin exercising an optimal amount 5 days a week, that's going to be very, very challenging. There's going to be a lot to move around.
Sure.
Switching to a healthy coffee and drinking more of it is a very easy move to make and a very enjoyable move, a lot of people will find. And it actually has incredible impacts on your disease prevention when it comes to your health and wellness. I mean, and that the numbers of when it comes to the disease prevention actually rivals something like exercise. So it's an easy shift, and it's a very, very high leverage shift. Now, I also want to talk about what you said about waking you up in the morning, this love affair. There is so much more going on in coffee than the average person knows and than even the experts know. And here's what I mean by that. There are literally hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of compounds in the coffee cherry. And when it's roasted, many more compounds are created, destroyed, and altered. So we're still finding out about all these things. And people say, yeah, the caffeine wakes you up. Well, if it's the caffeine, then why doesn't a Monster Energy drink make you feel as good as a cup of Purity coffee?
Yeah.
The answer is everything else in the coffee. There's an incredible amount of things like chlorogenic acid, which are anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. So that makes you feel better. There are terpenes and plant phenols. It's basically, if I can simplify it in lay terms, liquid plant life that energizes you. These terpenes actually can stimulate you in minor ways, and when it all works together, it's called the entourage effects. And you've got things like melanoidins and all these different compounds that give you that holistic coffee buzz. Now, here's what we're not talking about, Loree. You mentioned this in the beginning of your riff. There is medicinal coffee and there is non-medicinal coffee. And let me tell you, most of the coffee out there is non-medicinal.
Yeah.
So if you're putting sugar in your coffee, that's just a no-no. If you're putting whipped cream and pumps and all that, that's not what we're talking about. Right. There is some debate on, the keto guys will say add the butter, the vegan guys will say just go with some agave, whatever. All that aside, stay away from the sugar additives, stay away from the whipped creams, none of that. You should be treating your coffee like a medicinal beverage, like the health extract drink that it is.
That makes sense. And honestly, for me, I like a really, really robust, dark, rich coffee. And I love it when it's good, just black. And then on occasion, and I just kind of follow what my body feels like doing. If my body feels like something a little bit bumped up, then I might do my own version of like a bulletproof, which I call a fat coffee. And I'll do a little, you refer to that kind of the keto coffee. I'll do, just a little bit of this, a little butter, a little, coconut oil. And then I'll even put just a little, like a teaspoon of vanilla collagen in there and whip it up. But it's not the regular. It's just good black coffee is when it's good. It's so rewarding, just like it is. And it seems like, you can adulterate it so much with all that other stuff that you really would be just better off going and getting a Dairy Queen, because honestly, the difference between a small chocolate shake and a large vanilla frappuccino is almost zero when it comes to fat and calories. So, garbage in, garbage out.
For your health. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's definitely key to keep in mind. And also, I'll tell you, the production of the coffee really, really matters. This is something that we've discovered through scientific testing. I hate to break it to any anti-organic people out there, but coffee really opened my mind to organic growing and natural farming and the effects that has on the end food products. Now, I've been deep into this for a long time, so there's lots of people listening who are probably already familiar with this sort of thing. I spoke with Chris Trump from Natural Farming Co., and he was talking about the scientific lab tests that he did on his macadamia nuts and on these farms that he runs with natural methods, and how the magnesium was higher and they were more nutritious, even though the soil had less nutrients, because he was tending to the microbial life. It's an incredible subject, and we cover it on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. So I've been up on this, but I'll tell you what surprised me, Loree, is if you go back to the first episode of the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra comes on the show, talks about coffee, and I tell him, we have to choose organic coffee, right? I was queuing him up to say avoid pesticides, avoid the bad stuff.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It was surprising. What he said was, we are now finding out that organic foods are probably better for you than non-organic foods. Now, this is coming from the Harvard Dean of Education. This is the guy who teaches the next generation of doctors. So for him to be saying this is a pretty big step out of the niche natural farming world into mainstream medical care. So it's really interesting what's happening, and I'm kind of finding myself in the middle of it.
Yeah. So, okay. And here's the thing. It surprises me that it's not easier to find in this day and age good quality organic coffee.
3% of the supply qualifies as organic.
Yeah, it's not easy. And so, you're going to have to go to the, like a Whole Foods, or you're going to have to, go online, or, there's like one brand that might sell it in the grocery store. So, you have to be pretty proactive if you're going to be really committed to drinking your high quality organic coffee. You do have to be committed and find it and make sure you're stocked up on it, because it's not like walking down the aisle and pulling out, you're going to have to weed through a lot of stuff, and you probably aren't going to find it in your typical grocery store. But I like what you said about
the standards are high.
Yeah.
They're surprisingly high, not just the way it's grown, but the way it's transported and stored, the lack of use of pesticides, the lack of use of artificial fertilizers. It's a real, and listen, I can't speak for the rest of the food industry, but I do know coffee, and I do know coffee organic certification, and you are going to get a better product that actually tests higher in healthy compounds at the end of the day, which surprises some people. But if you're up on the natural farming science that's really out there, it's not surprising at all. It all makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's say that you are someone that is all about it, and you are committing to getting your organic, your awesome medicinal quality coffee, and you get it home. Now what? Does it make a difference in how you brew it in your coffee maker? Because I know for me, I mean, different coffee makers make your coffee taste different. And what happens when it's sitting in that pot, for an hour and a half, and now it has that kind of scorchy taste? Does it degrade the health properties of the coffee? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Some rules of thumb, and these are just going to be general guidelines to have in mind when you're thinking about the health of your coffee. So, of course, freshness. A lot of people don't know this, but most of the coffee on store shelves is stale. That's why they don't put a roast date. They put a best by date. Sometimes it takes months for it to ship over on the slow boats that it comes on and gets rebranded. So if you can find fresh coffee, that is ideal, either a local place or a subscription program like Purity Coffee, who ships it out right after it's roasted. Freshness is key, not just from the time it's harvested, not just from the time it's roasted, but from the time it's brewed and ground. So once it's ground, its health benefits begin to decay or degrade 15 minutes after grinding.
Oh,
so you really want to get that. Yeah, you really want to get it in your coffee maker and made. One thing I like to do is put it in my coffee maker before bed, and then the next morning hit it. I'm definitely losing a lot of health benefits, but you win the battles where you can, depending on how far you want to go. But if you're going all out, you don't want to do that. You want to have that freshly ground, fresh coffee. Definitely key. I would say the production practices are much more important than the brewing practices.
Okay.
Boiling water is a cooling process. Boils a little over 200 degrees depending on your altitude. So people brew with that boiling water. I would like to see people, if they're very, very conscious, go a little bit lower than that. If you see some of the really, really talented pour-over guys, they get the water barely boiling, but then when they pour it, they usually lift the spout up. If you've seen that move where they lift it up, that's because as the hot water is falling through the air, it's actually cooling a little bit before it hits the coffee. Yeah. So I would like to see people do it a little bit, maybe less hot than they might imagine. But really, the most important thing is getting a good quality coffee and brewing it however you want to consume it. Again, not tainting it with sugar, not tainting it with creamers and things like that. That's how you get a quality, health-conscious coffee.
Yeah, that's interesting about the pour. I never thought about it, that it was just kind of cooling the water a little bit. I just figured it was a flair for the dramatic, just like making it look cool, really good. Yeah, it looks really great. Totally.
And again, the Coffee Health and Science podcast, there is a lot of science behind brewing. Don't let me undersell it, but I'm here to summarize. So that's my overview.
Yeah, well, and it's like you said, I mean, however you can, the best you can, do the best you can, because if you set yourself up with so many new rules, especially all at once about how it's going to be so perfect, sometimes it actually is discouraging because it's a lot. So I think if you're somebody that's listening to this and you're doing your kind of usual store-bought, or your generic brand, and you put it in your Mr. Coffee and you brew it and you don't really think much about it, and then all of a sudden you have a list of a dozen new ways to do this, it could be a little overwhelming. So I think you're right. Start with one step, baby steps, and then kind of move into becoming a real guru about it, if you're called to. I'm like, I just actually learned now from you too, grinding the beans, you don't want to grind up enough for a couple of days. Like sometimes I'll be like, all right, I'll just grind these up for enough for 2 or 3 days and then I won't have to do it again. And now I'm like, okay, I better just back that up a little and do it every day if I really want to get the full maximum benefit out of my coffee beans, which I do because I'm a big fan of Purity coffee. So I know we're sounding listeners like a commercial for Purity coffee, but that's okay. I don't mind because I'm really big about promoting it. I love that coffee, and I don't know that I'm not aware of anything better on the planet so far that exists than that coffee brand. So I look forward to it, and I share it with everybody that I can.
Exactly. And here's why I promote Purity coffee. I'm happy if the listeners switch to an organic coffee that they like and that they will stick to. That's all I ask of the listeners. Go organic, find a coffee that you like, drink more of it. That's all I ask. The thing is, no one does the level of testing and retesting that Purity coffee does. And it reflects in our price point, but that's what you get for the best coffee on the planet. It's the coffee that nature intended. So again, they're really, if you're drinking organic, pesticide-free coffee, you're getting the health benefits. But if you want to step it up that extra notch and get coffee that is tested at the highest levels of antioxidants on the market, Purity coffee is the go-to. So I got to tell this, here's the thing, I'm a truth teller, and it's the most antioxidant-rich coffee. So if it's up your alley and if you are inclined to drink it, I definitely recommend Purity.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And, let's talk for a second about that antioxidant aspect, because the other thing I didn't realize was that Purity coffee, or a really, good quality organic coffee, is a superfood. And one of the reasons being that it's so high in antioxidants, one of the highest antioxidant foods, I think, on the planet. Do I have that right, Jordan? It's like higher than Western diet. I mean, it's higher than. then most of the things that you see when you Google, foods high in antioxidants, you see the usual list of, dark chocolate and blueberries and, whatever. And this just is far above that, isn't it?
Dark chocolate ranks at 8.38 micromoles per 100 grams, and that's chlorogenic acid. It's one of the most effective antioxidants, and it's one of the most common antioxidants. Blueberries rank at 9.24 micromoles per 100 grams, so that's a little bit higher there, jumping, what's that, maybe 12% higher. Coffee is at 22.73 micromoles, so it's over double blueberries. There really is nothing like it. And the other thing is it's quite easy to consume a couple of cups of coffee back to back to back. You got to go buy a lot of blueberries if you're going to be waking up every morning and shoving handfuls in your mouth.
Right.
So not only is it more rich, but it is much more ingestible. It is much more easy to incorporate into, again, these are the high leverage, easy moves for your overall health, specifically disease prevention. And, when it comes to antioxidants, this is really what fascinates the doctors who I talk to. With the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, I'm in this incredible role where I'm a podcaster, I'm a layperson, but I'm talking to doctors, and I'm going, do you know this information? Let me refer you to Sanjeev Chopra's talk. Let me refer you to here and there. And one of the things that really piques their interest is this anti-inflammation and antioxidant effect. And what's really interesting, Loree, is, again, blueberries don't have the same dementia prevention statistics. Blueberries don't have the same heart disease prevention statistics. And the reason that is all of this chlorogenic acid, all of these antioxidant compounds are coupled with this entourage effect that I mentioned before. Something about the caffeine, something about the melanoidins and the terpenoids and the plant phenols all work together and synergize and create this incredible neuroprotectant and hepaprotectant and all of these different incredible health qualities in coffee. We really don't understand it. That's what I'm learning is we don't know what's happening with all these compounds. We just know that there's hard data to show that it prevents all sorts of disease, and it probably has something to do with the antioxidant quality and the caffeine specifically.
Yeah, I think, and for listeners that aren't super health nuts, and you know that antioxidants are supposed to be good, but you're not exactly sure why. So just quickly, antioxidants, you guys, fight the free radicals, and they have been linked to a number like what we're talking about now, potential health benefits, including protection against heart disease and cancer and a whole host of other diseases, most of our self-imposed diseases in the West anyway. And then, of course, reducing inflammation, which is another pretty fundamental key to just about all of our chronic disease, I believe. Do you agree, Jordan?
And I have this incredible position where I get to talk to natural wellness specialists and then follow that up with a call to a Harvard doctor, really two sides of the spectrum. And all doctors agree that either all disease comes from inflammatory states, or at least all diseases are very prone to manifest when your body is in an inflammatory state. That is definitely a fair statement that I'll say across the board. Depending on how far into it, they are into the inflammatory process, they'll have different opinions, but at this point, it's pretty widely accepted.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just find it so amazing. I was just talking to a family member 2 days ago. In fact, it was literally the day after I listened to one of your latest podcasts about the effect when it comes to dementia, the brain, Alzheimer's, and medicinal coffee on that. And I was so fascinated by it. And then I was talking to a family member who was saying, Aunt so-and-so is starting to show signs of that very condition. So I'm sending links and say, you've got to listen to this at least now while you're waiting to figure things out. Start drinking some Purity coffee, please. Why wouldn't you? What do you think, Jordan, would be the top biggest coffee myths?
To be that coffee is bad for you. And it's wild because it does have these incredible protecting qualities against things like dementia, against things like cancer, and people actually think that it can contribute to those things. And there's a reason for that, Loree. We're going to do a whole episode on it. I can't get too deep into it here, But basically, there were a lot of studies done in the 50s on health and wellness. I'm sure you know how well those usually go when these sugar companies were paying off people to point the finger at fat for causing diseases, all sorts of craziness going on in the 50s.
Right.
Well, coffee got swept up into that too. Coffee got linked to breast cancer. Coffee got linked to a bunch of things, of course, not accounting for the incredible amount of alcohol consumption that was going on, the incredible amount of inactivity. Everybody was smoking. Doctors were still recommending cigarettes. There were some very sketchy, false studies done in the 50s showing that coffee is bad for you. And that really has stuck even till today. I'm stunned at how many people and even health professionals still have that stigma. I would say there's still a decent portion of health professionals that think those studies were true. And of course, we have hundreds and hundreds of, these aren't just little instances, little statistics here and there. These are meta studies done on coffee in the decades since then that show the exact opposite. And in fact, if you account for risk factors like drinking and smoking and inactivity, a lot of those old studies are actually reversed. So I'd say definitely one of the biggest coffee myths is that coffee is bad for you. Another myth that I'll dispel right here is an interesting one. Maybe the more advanced coffee aficionados will appreciate this. The myth that Robusta is somehow inferior. Now, coffee people may know about the different species of coffee. You have Arabica, which is kind of considered the higher quality bean, and then there's the Robusta, the kind of generic bean that doesn't have the same flavor, doesn't have the same quality. Well, really interestingly, at Purity Coffee, they're finding that it carries some unique health benefits when it comes to diabetes and some other chronic diseases, that there are unique health properties to Robusta, and Purity is going to work on a blend, a specific health blend with little bits of Robusta to try and target different diseases. So you may eventually see from Purity Coffee, and we hope other coffee companies, health-conscious blends, diabetes blend, Parkinson's blend. We tested to make sure, and the melanoidin levels are extra high. So if you have a family history of Parkinson's, you can drink this coffee. That's something that I'm very, very excited about, and something that I was definitely a holder of that misconception.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, the more reasons and the more options we have for medicinal coffee, I think the better. Everyone should be able to find something that they love. And you know what? I'm just going back for a second because I don't want to lose a thought. You mentioned about caffeine earlier, and you're right. All caffeine is not created equal. And I used to think, there's just a different strain of caffeine in certain teas and in certain coffees. And then you mentioned, the energy drinks, but maybe it's not so much about the caffeine as it is the combination of that caffeine with the other properties in the coffee beans. And I just think that's really interesting to note too. So Yeah.
The no-dose pills aren't going to give you the same health benefits as a cup of coffee. And what's also interesting, you'd find, Loree, is comparing health studies on decaf to caffeinated. Decaf still holds a lot of the disease prevention when it comes to the liver, when it comes to lots of different parts of the body, but loses some, specifically the neuroprotectant, the brain protecting qualities. So we don't really know what's going on, but we do know that it helps somehow. Very fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, because I occasionally love to have a cup in the afternoon, but I cannot have caffeine after like 12 o'clock because I'm super sensitive to it and it wakes me up. It has like a time delayed effect, and it'll wake me up at 2 in the morning for a couple of hours. So I have to, if I want to enjoy a coffee in the afternoon, I have to go to a decaf. And I'm glad you brought that up because I was wondering if I lose a lot
as well.
Yeah.
And I recommend that people do that. And, there's actually a lot of things you can look into for the caffeine sensitivity. Of course, my partner, Dr. Coffee, when he hears someone is caffeine sensitive, he doesn't accept it. He has all sorts of things you can do to drink more coffee and alter your diet this way and that sort of thing. But personally, I get it too. I drink coffee late into the night. I just switch to decaf at a certain point, and you're still getting a lot of those health benefits. So, yeah, I highly encourage that.
Yeah, I'll take it. I grind up some of my Purity, my decaf beans, and I enjoy that. Say, have you heard of the baking soda hack to help neutralize the acidic nature of coffee, to balance the pH? That's something that I do. I learned about it a few years ago, putting a pinch of baking soda in your coffee. I wondered if that's something that you had heard about, or maybe we need to ask one of the,
I've never heard of
doctors.
Yeah. I have not heard of that. Definitely interesting, and it would definitely be useful in a lower quality coffee when the acid levels do get pretty high. If you have a medium roast or a dark roast organic, the acidic effect on your body shouldn't be too impactful. But if that's something that you're concerned about, that makes sense to me. But I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, I'm curious to know more about it. I haven't been able to find much online, other than some demonstrations and people saying, this reduces the acidity of your coffee, and then they do like the little alkaline strip in there, comparing. And so I started doing that a few years ago, and actually before I learned about Purity Coffee. But it would be interesting to ask one of your doctors at some point what their opinion on that. I'm just curious if there's any real validity to it, or if, like you said, maybe yes for some of the lower grade, higher acidic coffee blends out there. It's interesting though. It's if you just put a little pinch in there, and you put too much if you can taste it. If you just put a little pinch, you can't taste it, and I don't know. But it's a curious thing. So. Tell me about a going rogue story. Do you have one, Jordan? I don't know if you remember when we talked about it before. I love it when I have a guest that's willing to share a time in their life or their career path or just anything that you were just going in one direction and at some point you just decided to put the brakes on and do, a 180 and just kind of break protocol and just go in a whole other direction. And maybe it was challenging or scary or disapproved of, but you did it anyway. And it turned out to be like the best choice for your life, changed the course of it. Do you have a story like that?
My whole life is a chain of those events. So I'll give you an answer to promote the idea of going rogue, but then I'll also dial it back and kind of give my bigger life philosophy on it. Yeah, cool. Basically, so Loree, you're familiar with me. You're familiar with my family and the Story of Life book. My father was an entrepreneur, and he's kind of got a wild hair. And of course, when he had me as his son, I was the same exact way. I mean, I've had a ridiculous career path. I started my first business at 13. I was selling cheats and hacks to a popular MMORPG game through my website at age 16. I produced 2 full-length hip-hop albums when I was 18 and 19. Do not ask me to share them with you. I will say no.
Okay.
I find, Loree, that some people are just destined to follow their own path and not conform to the regular roles of society. And I don't want to say this in a disparaging way, because really life is just all about satisfaction, gratitude, and happiness.
Yep.
And if you feel fulfilled and gratified in your role, that's all there is. Never second guess whatever your role is. However, some people just cannot stay in one space, cannot stay in that one cubicle, and I'm one of those people. And if you are one of those people, my number one piece of advice is to follow your intuition and ride that roller coaster the whole way, because you miss all the shots you don't take. And I can tell you, having been all over the place, and really, here's the thing. Here's the thing about going rogue, Loree. I'm kind of riffing here.
Yeah,
people are scared of failure. People are scared that they're going to try something new and they're going to fail, and that it's going to be a loss, that they're going to take an L, and that they're going to be 0-1 and everyone's going to laugh. It's very, very powerful and helpful to your life if you can shift out of that mind state. And let me explain. When it comes to any venture, when it comes to any life experience, the most important thing, in my opinion, the most important question you can ask yourself at the end is, did you grow from that experience? Did you gain experience points? Did you level up? Did you learn something? Did you somehow grow from that experience? If the answer is yes, then that's a win.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how bad it was. It doesn't matter if it was a failed business. It doesn't matter if it was a messy divorce. Doesn't matter how bad you think you have it. Did you grow? If the answer is yes, then that was a win. And you need to look at it like a win. And you need to not be scared of those failures, because I'll tell you, winning streaks don't teach you much.
No.
Losing streaks are full of lessons. So I really think it depends on the type of person you are. I've been a rogue since birth, so it's just kind of my instincts to, go off on these different life paths. But the most important thing is to remain authentic to yourself and find what makes you fulfilled, happy, and gratified.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. That's just awesome. And I think I love what you said about of even if you fall on your face, basically, even if you have failures, those are the things that you learn from, that you grow from. And I would add, those are the very things that make you so resilient. I mean, I've done that myself too since a young age, tried, dropping out of school and going and doing this and going and doing that. And like ridiculous failures, just ridiculous failures. But it's like, yeah, but I'm still here and I've learned so much. And it's like when you feel like nothing really phases you, and that's because I think of all of those experiences and you come up against challenges and sometimes they just really kick your ass. But wow, the resilience that you build and the courage that you build to tackle the next thing is invaluable.
Self-esteem, which is the relationship and the rapport that you have with yourself. And it really takes a shift in mind state. That's all that takes. It's a wild concept, but you can go from feeling like a total loser who just has all losses to someone who feels resilient by a simple shift in the way you think.
Totally. Right? That's the whole opening. That's the whole thing about this show. You got to shift your thinking. You have to shift. That's why we talk all about shifting in one way, shape, or form on this show. And today, we're hoping that a lot of people are going to shift their views and their protocols on drinking coffee, because there is so much goodness in this for you that I really I feel like sharing this information to me was so important. And I know there's just way more we could talk about it, but I think we gave the folks listening a really good starting point and understanding of why they want to really think about this and maybe make some changes today.
Jordan? I feel like, are you there? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Let me say this. Let me wrap up with this thought. I think that this really hits home now more than ever, because people are looking to take care of their own body. They're looking to take responsibility for their health. I think we all know the story of the people who get caught up in the medical system. The story of you get on a medication to fix the problem, which leads to another medication, which leads to a side effect and another medication. And, with all the miracles that modern medicine has provided, there's also been this kind of vacuum of responsibility. And so people are looking for these ways to improve their health on their own. There's this huge movement of taking responsibility for your health. So like I said, if you have a family history of liver disease or Parkinson's or dementia or even depression, tons of different cancers that coffee can prevent, take responsibility for your health. Get on a good, clean, organic coffee and have this be part of your daily routine to highly statistically reduce your chances of these chronic crippling diseases. You won't regret it, and no one's going to do that for you. You know what I mean? This is something we take into our own hands. So I'm proud to be the conveyor of this information and this message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people are, the excuse is the resources. Well, it's more expensive. But boy, if you really think about it, isn't the ill health the greatest cost to you? Way far greater than, a few extra dollars on some quality coffee that can have a huge effect on your health. So cut out something else and reallocate those dollars to something that is going to help you instead of harm you.
General, that is prioritizing your health and fitness. And it may seem at times to be a not profitable move, but really in the long run it is. And all of the most successful and healthy people will tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to just touch on real quick, and this is not so much about the medicinal qualities of coffee, but just another good reason to go that route, though, because I think that we are also so addicted, as we should be, to rituals, as long as they're rituals that don't harm us, healthy rituals. And I think that, again, that ritual of drinking coffee And I was just talking to my daughter-in-law about this the other day, and we're comparing notes about, when we get up in the morning and husbands, bring a cup of coffee in bed, and you look forward to having that time over that coffee to sit and, to start your day or to meet up in the afternoon. Or, I started drinking coffee when I was 5 years old with my grandmother, and I'm sure she had no idea that the coffee that she was probably giving me, with a couple of lumps of sugar was probably not the healthiest good idea. But I have the best memories of these rituals with my grandmother drinking coffee, and with my family, or my daughter when we go visit. So I think that that's a big part of it. And if you have these wonderful rituals that are such a huge part of your life, again, make sure that you're doing something healthy for yourself beyond just the experience of the moment. Give your body something really good, because we are such creatures of habit, and those rituals, if they're not healthy, they can bite you in the ass when you're not expecting it.
It really has such a deep, rich history in human ritual. The ancient Turkish coffee houses, the height of ancient Turkish society, is where the elite would gather and exchange ideas and argue over politics. And like you said, we've incorporated it into our personal lives so much as this ritual. One of the people who I work with, one of my dear, dear friends, Dr. Joel Wade, I got to plug his podcast. It's called the Mastering Happiness Podcast. Mm-hmm. Tools and strategies to live a happier, healthier life. Everyone needs to subscribe to it. I do that show for free because I support this man's work so much. He talked about the ritual aspects of coffee and how that may play into our overall health and well-being. When I had Dr. Sanjivan for the longevity episode, he talked about meditation and how meditation can heal and elongate your telomeres, which is a genetic indicator of how long you're going to live. Basically, meditation makes you live longer. And there's something very, very meditative about first thing in the morning, part of your morning ritual. People talk about morning rituals.
Yep.
When you're just focusing on grinding the coffee, you're not focusing on anything except the amount of water that you're putting in. You're, adding the filter. This little ritual may have some sort of meditative quality, which will benefit our health as well. And like you said, it's somewhat of a love affair. It's somewhat of a respite. And I got to tell you, that contributes to your overall sense of well-being. Yes. And that's one of the things Dr. Joel Wade has taught me is it's all intertwined. We like to put up barriers between mental health and emotional health and physical health and feeling good from being charitable. All of those things are the same. That all plays into life and health. And I think that coffee shows up a couple different places there. So I'm all about it. And I think it's really one of the most incredible human rituals that we involve ourselves in.
Yeah, I agree. It's so powerful. I think it's so much more powerful, I think, than people are consciously aware of. But I think with hopefully with our podcast today and all of the podcasting that you're doing and the doctors that you're working with, the news is going to spread. There's a new kid in town, this Purity Coffee, I'm
all about it. Again, it's like people need to know this. This is interesting. And there's a lot of misconception out there. Again, if we can get them drinking Purity, great. But just switch to an organic coffee. You will not regret it. And let's reshape the way we think about this widely consumed beverage that we already love. Let's give ourselves permission and step up our game when it comes to quality.
Well said. I love it. Jordan, where can people find out more about you and your podcast? What can you share with us? PurityCoffeePodcast.com will bring you to the Coffee Health and Science Podcast, so check that out. PurityCoffee.com, if you want to get started there, promo code podcast gets you 10% off your first order. We'd love to have you. But again, just important to get you drinking organic. That's what you should take away from this episode. Shout out to the Mastering Happiness Podcast, which I produce. Definitely would entertain your audience. And, of course, Lifebook, designing your ideal life vision and mapping out the steps to get there. Anyone who's interested in Lifebook, just Google it, find it at Mind Valley. It's everywhere. And we're kicking butt. I just want to thank you, Loree. You're a wonderful host. This was a very enjoyable time. I can't believe how fast it flew by. If you ever want me to come back on and rap some more, I'd be happy to. I would love that because I'm a huge fan of Lifebook. I did it a few years ago, and I would love to have you back to talk about Lifebook, and I'm sure we can find a couple of other great subjects. So I will definitely take you up on that offer. Please come back.
Talk to you later. Thank you so much, Loree.
Wow, you guys, that was fantastic. I bet you had no idea that the right kind of coffee is actually a superfood with a ton of important health benefits for us. So I hope that if you're a coffee lover like me and like Jordan, and you drink it every day, you'll do right by your brain and your body, and you'll allocate some of your resources to getting the best coffee that you can find. Whatever it is, try to find something that's organic, the highest quality that works for you. It's kind of a no-brainer, really. You heard all of the information there, and please check out his Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, too, because there is a ton more information. But that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you got something good out of this episode, please give me a rating and help spread this good shift around by sharing it with your friends. Until next week, stay feisty, my friends. Go forth and make some epic shift happen in your life. You too, Gary V.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.